As you can probably tell by the enormous skull in the background that's currently peering deep into the chasm of my soul, Halloween is right around the corner. Another hint might be that I'm not wearing the requisite Ahab mask, man. You know, I figured I spent all year in the mask. Halloween would probably be the best time to take it off. So here you go. Scariest face you're going to see on Halloween. As you can probably notice, Goontick's not here with me because he's asleep. Stinky! But here I am with the channel's requisite Halloween special.
Anything goes if it's out of line from a couple of corpulent.
A lot of people like to watch horror movies around the Halloween time. But for me, as a longtime horror fan, I kind of take a break during Halloween. I don't really watch horror movies during Halloween because I spend my whole year doing that. But I'm going to make some recommends. And now the usual thing, like we've done a video before where we said, well, what are some fun kind of Halloween spirit, flicks that you can enjoy, because that's mostly what people get into during the Halloween time. Something that's fun, even comedic at times, bright and colorful, well, I'm going to do the opposite and give you stuff that scares Ahab. Not in the standard way that a lot of people, just get outright frightened, jumping out of their seat and screaming. No, I don't mean that way. I've watched too many horror movies to take them in that particular style. What I mean is they might deeply unsettle me. The implications of them might impact me in such a way that induce a certain feeling in me. And yes, even some of these still kind of just give me the willies straight up. Let's get straight into it, baby. The Eyes of My Mother can be best described as kind of an art horror film.
Is this your mother?
Yes.
What did she do?
She was a surgeon in Portugal.
What kind?
Eyes. We used to do dissections together.
What happened to her?
This is kind of like a deeply tragic and at the same time very disturbing view into the life of a woman that experienced severe trauma as a child and was left basically to fend with the repercussions of how other people dealt with that trauma. As a result, her ethics and her morals are enormously warped. And throughout the course of this movie, we're dropped into 3 different points in her life to see where exactly she is as a person. And what she does is informed by that moment in her nascent youth ever so much, by the interactions with her parent, by the knowledge that was ingrained in her by another parent. All that reflects but is perverted as time goes on. And as I said, there's just a haunting feeling to that progress, but also there's a tragic thing because it almost seems like she was unfairly destined to her fate, this main character.
I remember I was fascinated by how the inside of the body looked.
The Eyes of My Mother is beautifully shot in black and white. And why does it scare me? It scares me because, quite simply, it's easy to see how a lot of us can go deep into a downward spiral and stagnate there. And because we stay there, we can become something monstrous. Even if we try to fight it, it's almost like an inevitable fate. And that's what this movie ultimately depicts, like a very bleak fatalism. Eyes of My Mother, I highly recommend it. It's not for everyone, and it's definitely not going to be a fun romp that you pop in for a whole crew of people. But if you want to be just kind of bummed the fuck out by a movie in an artistic way, this is a good way to go. The Eyes of My Mother.
She always hoped I would be a surgeon one day.
This is a Mexican movie known as La Región Salvaje. And it is basically, before it is a horror movie, it is a family drama that is deeply interweaved with how we deal with sexuality in our society. And because of this, some people will be like, well, where's my monsters and where's my gore and where's that? It's not that kind of movie. You know what I'm saying? This is very much a dramatic film that slowly becomes a terrifying cosmic horror picture, man. And it's really unique in that sense. You know, this is the story of a woman that is basically trapped in her marriage, trapped in her social strata, if you will. And it's a movie about how not only society but tradition and even your location can dictate what you do in your life. It's a movie about people that feel enslaved with their everyday life. Well, into the life of this woman is introduced a mysterious woman that says, well, I got something you got to see.
Primero pensarás que estás alucinando. Lo que está allá en la cabaña es la parte primitiva de todos.
And therein comes the strangeness of this film, and that's where we begin to see the elements of horror really creep in, as this woman is introduced to something otherworldly, something uncanny that does change her life. But ultimately, this movie is, as aforementioned, one dripping with cosmic dread, and so it ends up in a place that is, man, it is bleak. You know what I'm saying? It's bleak.
¿Regresarías? Solo da placer. Nunca ha lastimado a nadie.
Why does it scare me? Because cosmic horror is fucking scary. That's why, man. The very idea that we may, in fact, be meaningless, you know, that we may be peons in this large game of chess to greater beings is, it's unnerving as hell. And this movie lets that creep in ever so expertly. Love The Untamed. To summarize, it follows as succinctly as I can. It's basically about a sexually transmitted curse. But of course, it all serves as a greater metaphor for, you know, societal perception of anything from promiscuity to actually having to carry the burden of something, you know, well, venereal disease, for lack of better words, you know?
You're not going to believe me, and I need you to remember what I'm saying. This thing, it's going to follow you. Somebody gave it to me, and I passed it to you.
Let me just say this. The score alone should bring you to this picture. It is freaking fantastic. You know, synth heavy, very Carpenter-esque. And man, it's fantastic. Even if you don't like the movie, the score, chef's kisses, man. I love it. It's got some great horror set pieces. It's kind of relentless, like a pursuit film. And again, like the other previous films, it ends in a kind of like very bleak territory. Although this one's a lot more suggestive than the others. You know, technically it leaves you going, even if you've won, you haven't won. You know, but it follows. Why does it scare me? It's not so much the uncomfortable ideas of like sexually transmitted diseases. It's much more the idea of social stigma that this film carries, you know? How it can haunt you. And it goes beyond sexually transmitted diseases. It can apply to anything. If you carry some form of social stigma, it'll follow you everywhere. And you will always have this unshakable feeling that it's there waiting to come back and make your life impossible.
Mom? No, it's me. Everything's okay.
It Follows. Brilliant. Next up is something a little bit more tradish, and that is, boom, John Carpenter's Prince of Darkness. Now, from the title alone, you might be going, oh, yeah, that does sound spooky, guy. And if you haven't seen it, you'd be right. And if you've seen it, you probably know that this thing is lathered in atmosphere. And that's really the major thing that gets under my skin about this movie. It really succeeds at creating, fomenting this atmosphere thickly. So that's one of the things. But what is Prince of Dark? Princess? That would be an interesting one too. What is Prince of Darkness about? No, it's not about Ozzy Osbourne. It's about these graduate students and their teacher that are called in by a local church to study what can only be described as a scientifically realistic and tangible version of the idea of a devil.
Suppose what your faith has said was essentially correct. Suppose there is a universal mind controlling everything, a God willing the behavior of every subatomic particle. Now, every particle has an antiparticle. Its mirror image, its negative side. Maybe this universal mind resides in the mirror image instead of in our universe as we wanted to believe. Maybe he's anti-God, bringing darkness instead of light.
And that's another thing that really is eerie about Prince of Darkness. It's about these beliefs that are ingrained in us by tradition being seen through a new lens, and how that in itself can make those ideas 10 times more scary. You know, I don't know how to best describe Prince of Darkness other than John Carpenter's The Thing is usually seen as his best movie. For me, Prince of Darkness is his best movie, and it's a movie that, you know, didn't have the budget that Thing did, so it has to fight a little against that, but I think it succeeds wonderfully in creating something uniquely haunting, and yet that feels rooted in a lot of the Western traditions of the world. Also, a great John Carpenter score that's really haunting. Some images that will stick in your freaking mind forever, man.
Hello? Hello?
Come here, look at this.
I've got a message for you, and you're not going to like it.
Look at his chest.
Ready for death.
Jesus Christ!
Love it. Next up, we're going to go super traditional. This is a movie that I don't see not being in a lot of top 10 movies that scare people for the forthcoming future, man. It's been in lists forever, and I think it's going to be on lists for a pretty long time still. What am I talking about? I'm talking about none other than the classic The Exorcist, Willem Friedkin, Willem Peter Blatty. Man, is this a classic or is this a classic? Now, what I love most about The Exorcist is that it is innately a drama about faith. It's about three walks of faith being faced with undeniable evil, and where do those paths take these people? So you have an agnostic, in the mother of the possessed. You have a doubting believer in Father Karras, and you have a person that's absolutely adamant in their faith in Father Merrin. People focus maybe a bit too much on the horror, but William Peter Blatty was such a religious man, and this script that he wrote based on his book, it's very faithful to the book, and it doesn't abandon any of those themes. And I think that's what's most important in this movie. It's a movie about a person or several people finding themselves somewhere else after going through this experience. Most importantly, of course, in the movie is Father Karras, who goes from a doubter to someone that is willing to sacrifice themselves because of their belief. This has one of my favorite characters in cinema history, in Father Merrin, played by Max von Sydow. It's an iconic role, and he is one of those characters that I find to be admirable as a character, and he's just absolutely smashes the role in this. Beautifully shot. Even scenes that have nothing to do with the horror aspects of this feel haunting. It feels like this is set in a haunted world. I mean, I could go on and on about the multiple iconic sequences in this that just leave such a resounding impact on the mind, but we all know what those are. Why is The Exorcist scary to me? You would have to completely reassess your life if something undeniably evil was right in front of you, and you'd be like, well, this changes fucking everything, man. And that's why the characters in the movie are so important. You see a person that's like most people, kind of agnostic, kind of like, well, if I see it, I'll believe it. And then you have this doubter that should believe, has everything in his life, has set him on this path to belief, but is in a doubting place. And then you have a guy that has seen a lot and believes to his core, but they all seen the same thing. And all their lives are completely altered by it, because it would be just unfathomable to have to stand in the face of that. Absolute masterpiece. From one of my fave authors. He's only directed 3 movies, Hellraiser being one of them, Nightbreed being another, Lord of Illusions being his 3rd and last, and I think that this is his best picture. This movie is like a mishmash of elements that I absolutely love to study, to engage in, to see in movies. We have neo-noir elements. We have, of course, horror. We have cosmic horror elements. We have cults. Magic, that is to say illusionism. I'm a big fan of that. This thing seemed to be like just catered to me. When I saw it, I was like, did he make this for me especially? Because I think he did. Lord of Illusions is about an apocalyptic cult that has its own prophet, its own scion of the end times.
And the fire said to me, Nix, you are my instrument. From now on, you shall be known as the Puritan.
And he is thwarted only to be resurrected later in life and begin this, final stretch to the destruction of the world once again. And he is being investigated by a private detective that has been hired to find a missing magician that happened to be one of the ex-members of that cult and the guy that put that maniacal prophet in the grave to begin with. The detective is played by Scott Bakula, which of course I love. But really, why does this movie scare me? Oh man, let me tell you. Daniel Van Bargen, most renowned for his comedic roles on TV, from everything from Malcolm in the Middle to Seinfeld, is the villain Nix in this right there, and he plays this bizarre prophet of the end times, given these abilities by God knows what, and his whole purpose is, to put it as he said,
I was born to murder the world.
There is just something about that character that is unsettling. He's He does not give a crap about adulation, though he has it, in spades. He has an entire cult, lapping at his feet. He does not care.
Here is my wisdom.
And there's just something about the way the character is presented that reminds me a lot about H.P. Lovecraft's Nyarlathotep. And I don't know, man. Nyx is just a scary mix of things that I find fucking unsettling, man. Having been raised in a cult myself, I find the cult aspect of Nyx to be disturbing as hell. And cosmic terror. He's very much, again, like I said, very much in the vein of Nyarlathotep from Lovecraft. That is also an unsettling thing for me. So it's the perfect potion when it comes to this character of Nyx. Fantastic movie, super underrated. If you are going to watch it, watch the unrated cut. It is, I will say, fair warning, of the ones that I've shown so far, this one does have very disturbing imagery that's maybe not for your... If you're familiar with horror, then yeah, I mean, it's a walk in the park. But if you're not, there's some really unsettling stuff in there. But Lord of Illusions, absolute underrated masterpiece. Robert Eggers, the director, is renowned for making films that feel absolutely real to the time and the place that he's making them. And this one's set in the early days of New England here in America. And the story centers around a family that has been expelled from, as was typical back then, a very religious community, puritanical community. They've been expelled for some controversy, spiritual controversy that they didn't agree with in terms of being in that society. And stubborn and unwilling to bend on their belief, they go out into the wilderness, led by the father. In the wilderness, they fend for themselves, and soon it becomes evident that no matter what may be out in the wilderness, spoiler alert, witches, it's more the family tearing at themselves. It's more their overzealous supposed spirituality that's tearing them apart and ultimately leading some of them into very dark places. That is why I find The Witch scary, because I can relate very much to the idea of overzealous spirituality just tearing away at the seams of your being. Having been raised in a cult, that's kind of like the environment I was in a lot. A lot of people just constantly finding a reason to bring you down, to put themselves on top. The Witch is absolutely haunting in that regard, and it's beautifully shot. Man, Eggers is such a master of his craft. Absolutely love The Witch. I think it's a masterpiece, a modern masterpiece, and it's absolutely worthy of being next to movies like The Exorcist. People like to shit on James Wan. They like to shit on anything that's related to modern horror that appeals to the masses, and this one definitely did appeal to the masses. But I never got that about horror fans, that once something gets mainstream attention, they'll shit on it. Never got that. If it's good, it's good. Period. Doesn't matter where it came from, who made it. I absolutely love Insidious. Insidious is, first of all, carves a style all of its own, carves a mythology all of its own, and creates something that feels unique and yet feels like it's honoring, I should say, films such as like Poltergeist, and in my opinion, kind of doing it better than that. It's also a movie that it uses a lot of jump scares. I know people are, especially in the horror community, people are like, oh, jump scares, they're ass. I mean, like 99% of movies have jump scares. It's all about how you make them work. And I think Insidious crafts some very insidiously great jump scares, man. They really sneak up on you, and even when you expect them, they're just so well executed that I think they really leave a particular impression on the viewer.
It was standing there in the corner. asked it, "Who are you?" And it said it was a visitor. I said, "What do you want?" It said Dalton. I can still hear that voice.
If you, I mean, most people have seen it, but if you haven't seen it, it's best to discover how it almost fits into like a dark fantasy element in there because of the mythos that they create around the idea of, you know, the world beyond ours. Insidious, I think, deserves a lot of respect. I know that's controversial to some, but there you go. The final movie is a movie that initially I spat upon, man, and I'm ashamed to say that. When this came out, my edgy horror-loving self back then was like, what is this, man? I could do this with my eyes closed in my backyard. This is nonsense. This is garbage. This is not horror, I said. Even though I watched it and dismissed it at first theatrically, something in it stuck in my head that I decided to pick up the DVD later, and sure enough, right then and there I became a convert and realized how epically foolish I was for even saying all that stuff or thinking that. What movie am I talking about? I'm talking about the movie that even if you don't like, you have to respect how it's a treasure trove of knowledge about how to market a movie and how to, really create a feeling of realism before anybody even sees the frame of it. And we're talking about the Blair Witch Project, man. One of the found footage flicks that made found footage exponentially popular. Found footage existed before that, of course, but I'm talking like once Blair Witch hit, it kind of became a thing, you know, to make that type of picture. And rightfully so, man. It was copied many a time, but rarely duplicated and rarely as effective. And it's astonishing that it's that effective because so very little happens. It's all about viably presenting the ideas that it's presenting and making you feel the moment. That's why this movie succeeds. It actually creates something that doesn't overextend what it shows ever, you know, and but the whole time it presents it realistically enough so that you feel and that you could get into the feeling. And back then, you got to remember, a lot of people thought that this thing was real. I didn't, but a lot of people did, and I thought that was fascinating. Even, you know, during my little hater stage of it, I thought that was fascinating. But they did something awesome, which if you buy, you know, most discs of this, they'll have the documentary that accompanied the release of this movie. And that, again, was presented very realistically, and it provided the background to the witch. So you went in with this backstory that was presented in a completely different delivery system by the directors. You went in knowing the background of this witch a lot more intimately than the movie lets you know, and then you just had these people barrel into the experience and let your mind do the rest of the legwork. You know, legendary, man. Legendary. I know people still, it's a very controversial film for a lot of people, but I think it's deserving of every accolade, every God of every cent it earned. And I am ashamed that I ever had hated it, but I am proud to have quickly changed my mind. But why does this scare me? Because it effectively evokes your own imagination to do the work. And, you know, a lot of horror that is very good works on that alone. This one depends on it the whole damn time, and it does so effectively. Great movie. Anyways, guys, tell me what you think about that list. These are the movies that scare your boy Ahab, and the reasons why. Have you seen any of these? Do they scare you? Do they not? And if something does scare you, what movie is it and why? Let me know. I gotta know. Maybe I want to see that movie, man. Anyway, have a happy Halloween, one and all. I'm out.